When you're willing to be vulnerable and say, look, I'm not perfect. We're humans. We make mistakes. And frankly, if you've been around the world for any length of time and you haven't made a mistake, I don't want to hire you because you're obviously not trying anything. You're just doing everything super safe. And so I think that's a lot of it is just being comfortable in your own skin. Because people can feel that, right? They can feel when you're trying to make yourself appear like the person you think they want.
My name's Mike Lander, and you're listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast, where we bring you actionable insights about sales RFPs, negotiations, and difficult procurement discussions from sales leaders, brand leaders, and procurement leaders. Please subscribe to get updates when new episodes are released. Tom, thanks ever so much for joining me on Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast.
I am thrilled and honored to be here with you today.
I'm delighted to have you on the show, Tom, because we met. It was summer this year, I think, was it? Is that right?
Well, I guess spring. Yeah, it was
May,
wasn't
summer? It? Yeah, it was May. It was May, wasn't
Close
it?
enough.
Yeah, exactly. In Denver, from memory. And you'd spoken on stage and I was coming up next. And you reminded me of all the things I hadn't done in my preparation. So it's great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. A lot of people don't like when that happens and don't want to ever talk to me again.
Constant learner, constant lifelong learner. So for the audience, Tom, who are you? What do you do? And what's your favorite song and why?
I am Tom Martin. I am the founder and president of Converse Digital. And I work with individuals, mostly in the professional service agency space, to help them become more persuasive presenters, pitching and sales training type work, mostly in the pitching space, helping them build business development programs and build better pitch decks so they can win more business. Favorite song? We were joking about this. I think I'm going to go with The Toast by a small band called Williams Riley. It's a Louisiana band. I don't even know if they still sing and produce albums, but it's a fabulous song because it is really all about what life's truly about. Just good friends, good times, good food, good drinks, and just you should never forget that. You should always celebrate it because that'll make you a happier person.
Absolutely. And it's the reason I asked the question when people listen to the show, it's interesting. It's normally about relationships. Songs have a way of reminding us of people, of times, of good times, of bad times, of sad times. But we connect as human beings with music and we connect around things that we did and people that we know. So yeah, that's really interesting. Very common thread.
That's super interesting. I've never thought about music like that before.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting.
You're
Tom.
right.
It's a common thread across all the shows that I've done. I switched the question. I used to say something unusual about yourself. Now I say, what's your favorite song? I get a very different reaction, but a common theme is around. It reminds them of a certain time, of people, of something they were doing with someone. So yeah, it's really interesting. So questions. Let's start off with, what's the science behind delivering a perfect pitch?
The science behind it is really interesting because we believe as a global society that people who can pitch, you're just either born with it or you're not, right? It's the classic, the person who has the golden tongue. And what's interesting, when you look at great presenters and people that are persuasive and you reverse engineer it, what you figure out is that they're just naturally doing what science tells us to do. And the primary things that science focuses on is structuring your argument or your persuasive position in a way that makes it really, really easy for the human brain to understand it, process it, and then ultimately retain it. Because I don't know about you, but very seldom do I make a pitch to anybody about anything and get an answer right then and there in the meeting.
Yeah.
They're going to go back
Almost
and talk
impossible.
about it internally.
Yeah.
They're going to go. The worst is if they have to then take it to bosses or a buying committee, and then they're making your presentation on your behalf. And so it's really the number one most important thing that people don't think about is if they can't remember what you said 5 minutes after you said it, they're probably not going to say yes.
Exactly right. Brilliant. So, it reminds me of, I've been doing, sales pitches and presenting and conferences as long as you have, Tom, probably a bit long because I'm probably older than you are, Tom. Sadly, but I am older. But I recently had some training from a brilliant guy who's an actor and speech trainer. And it was really interesting. So he's from a company called the London Speech Workshops. Just as a quick interlude, so see how this resonates. He gave me a really simple tip and I tried it out and it worked for me. Simple thing, he said, pause, emphasize, justify, and land your message. And he said, if you try and do that when you're presenting and you're pitching, just even getting the tone right of your voice, the speed of it, if you slow down and pause, he said, you'll find that you can't really go that far wrong in terms of following a thread. But what I'm really interested in is, how do you make yourself memorable, Tom? So how does that work?
Well, it's interesting because most of the training that's out there around presenting tends to be like the training you took. It's what I call the theatrics of presenting. And all of those things that they told you are absolutely correct. And it bleeds into the science. So one of the things that I talk a lot about with people when we're training with them is you need to control and direct the audience's attention so that they are consuming your argument exactly the way you want it to be consumed. And that's the biggest thing, frankly, that people do wrong is they walk in and they do what I call a show up and throw up presentation. So they show up and then they basically just tell you everything they know about a subject. Or if they're trying to convince you to buy an ad campaign or do a certain marketing strategy, they'll just tell you everything they know about why this is a good idea. And it's not in any particular order. It's not necessarily structured to create what I call a yellow brick road, where you're going from one point to the next. And it's like, yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. And so what happens is, because they're not structuring it, the human brain, what they call cognitive load. And when you're listening to somebody and they haven't structured and they haven't really thought through how they're going to present this to you, and they're forcing you to structure it, and you will try to structure it, the brain will try to do that. You put this enormous cognitive load on the brain, and the brain can either process something or remember it. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, but basically that's the two tasks that it does while it's listening to something. If you're putting all the energy to processing, there's little energy left for remembering things. But if you can lower the front end, make it easy to understand to where the brain's not working very hard, now it has all this leftover energy it can use to then push and process that information back into long-term memory. And that's the secret of being memorable. A lot of people think it's about just saying something really clever, and there's some, metaphorical linkage, and there's some tricks and tips, like the keynote that you saw, My Life's a Pitch. There's a reason that title's the title, because when most people hear it or read it, they instantly hear the other version of that sentence, life's up, and they change one letter. And it's a mnemonic, it's a memory device, And so, yes, there's room for that. But when people can come back and replay the core message of that presentation days, weeks later, it's because it was structured to make it really easy to understand, and something that they would remember weeks later, and then hopefully call us to hire us to, present that kind of training to their entire company.
So let me kind of get a bit deeper into that. And we haven't prepared this. And that's the beauty of the podcast I do. We have a bit of a chat and we see what comes out.
Right.
So before the next question. And where I'm kind of going with this is, and we see this a lot, agencies get a brief. The client sent the brief out to 5 agencies, and then 3 of them are shortlisted, and you have to turn up and pitch. And that could be an RFP, or it could just be a straightforward brief. The principle's the same. So what I say to all my agency clients is, the fact that you're in the room normally means any one of the agencies, any one of the 3 could do the work. So you've kind of earned the right to be in the room, but any of you could win. Now it's down to, on the day, you've got to do something in the hour and a half that you've got, which tips the balance in your favor. And if it's a procurement-led process, typically the chemistry bit, can I work with you? Do I think I can trust you? Are you good at answering questions on your feet? That can account for 20 to 40% of the reason that we go, it's Tom and Tom's team. There's more to it than that. There's lots more complication. But where I'm going is, what happens in the room, Tom? So how do you advise agencies to build the yellow brick road in a pitch where it's like, you can't just regurgitate what you sent in your proposal? That's a route to disaster. So what do you do instead? Unrehearsed audience, by the way. I didn't prompt Tom before, so this will be interesting to see what he says.
Well, luckily in my 30 years in the ad business, I may have been in this position
You may
just
have been
a few
there
times.
once or twice, exactly.
I may have been in a pitch going, how the hell do I win this? Or more appropriate, how do we?
Yeah,
it's a
exactly.
team approach. The short answer to that is yes, if you're in the finals, everybody in the room, or at least the key people, believe that you are a potential solution. That's a pretty low bar. And if there's 3 to 5, that's a pretty low bar. What I always did, and what I counsel agencies to do now, is try to really honestly look at yourselves and the competition and understand, where do you fall on the perception of authority? Because at the end of the day, agencies we think we sell services, we don't. We sell the promise of an outcome. We sell trust. Do you believe that I'm the best agency to deliver some outcome? Because we can all deliver it, but who's most likely? And that's what you're selling. You're selling the reduction of risk. And so part of that is understanding the risk. But the second part is understanding when you walk in the room, where are you going to be? Are you the high trust, high credibility option? Upper right-hand quadrant kind of thing? Are you a high credibility, low trust? Are you a high trust, low credibility? Are you low trust, low credibility, which means you're the long shot, you married somebody's sister, and that's how you got in?
Yeah.
But what I tell them is that, look, if I've got a basic pitch presentation, depending on where I fall in those 4 categories, where I believe the agency falls in that 4 categories, that's the resulting deck and presentation is 4 completely different decks. How the arguments are built, what kind of arguments, are we going to try to do something that's just really eye-catching? You're going to build 4 completely different pitches based on that. And when you do that, that helps you figure out, okay, we need to do something really big and bold. If we're high trust but low credibility, we got to do something big and bold that really shows everybody in the room we have a unique insight that even you don't have. Because then it's like, oh, okay, maybe these guys know something that we don't think they know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Versus, if you're super high credibility, but you're low trust, well, it's a different presentation. You've got to do stuff to build trust because they know you know it better than anybody else. They just don't know, Are you the ones that we want to work with day in and day out? So It's a nuance, but that nuance is what separates the winners and the losers. And the bigger the account, the higher the risk level, the more important that analysis is, I believe.
Brilliant. So, and just then talk about this kind of, before we move on to the next topic, building this yellow brick road. What is that? Because people listening, they could be driving to and from school, they could be going to and from work. They're listening to this and they're going, sounds right. How do I build a yellow brick road? What does one look like? How do I construct one?
Well, it's the reason I love the analogy is if you think about walking down an actual brick road, it's individual bricks, right? And if you space those bricks really far apart, so I got to kind of take a long step to get to it. I'm a little off balance. It's a little harder to do it. But if you put them right next to one another so that every time my foot falls, it's right where it should be, I don't feel off balance. Arguments are the same way. If I give you a set of data points and then I give you a conclusion from those data points and you go, yeah, that's not a big leap of logic. That's not a big leap of faith to get there. That completely tracks perfectly in my mind. I don't see any red flags. There's no warning bells going off. That's a yellow brick road. But if I say 1 or 2 things and then I take a pretty big leap, or worse yet, I just take the damn leap. Exactly. I don't really give. And that I've seen this. I sat in a presentation with a client who hired us really just to be a consigliere, because they had hired a bunch of new agencies and they just didn't know if they really trusted all these, big agencies, names you would know. And here's little old me, right? And I'm sitting in this meeting in a city in the northern part of the United States, and I'm listening to people make campaign recommendations, what to do with this brand I had worked on and off for 10 years and knew really well. And they would just say, you should do this.
It's like, why?
There was no lead up. There was no yellow brick, anything. It was
there's no breadcrumbs
here's
to
our
follow.
Awesome idea.
Yeah.
Right. Like, here, we think you should do this. Okay. And they did it like 4 or 5 times, like big, expensive ideas. And I was like, where's the lead up? Where's the yellow brick road that helps her understand that why that's such a good idea? Other than you think it is, because we're glad you think it is. But they thought they were coming in and they thought they were upper right-hand corner, high trust, high credibility, lots of authority. And in that quadrant, you don't have to do as much lead up because the assumption is you know what the hell you're talking about. I don't think they were. I think at best they were maybe, lower right hand, but maybe even lower left hand. And they just, and they didn't get it. And that's the thing is if you can understand how many bricks you need to put, how close they need to be together, maybe it needs to be 2 presentations, not 1. Maybe you can't get it all done. You can't get to yes in 1 presentation. You just got to get to not getting a no. That's the part I think so many agencies miss is they either just don't want to do the work, or they just, maybe it's an ego thing, or they think it'll make them look less confident. But you've really got to set it up so that when you get to the end and you make the big payoff, theoretically, the client should already be there. Like when you make your big payoff, they should be like, oh, yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense. You win.
Exactly. I had a guy on the podcast last week, Uli Applebaum, I think his name was. You can see him on the show last episode. And he talked about he does a lot of brand strategy work and looked at all the research. And he said there are 3 kind of big things that agencies need to think about when they're pitching. Any services company needs to think about. And the pitching can start way before you're actually in the room. This is about raising awareness, etc. He said 3 simple things. Be focused, i.e. be in a niche. Be distinctive, so stand for something. And be human, be emotional. Talk about the last bit, Tom. When you're in a room and you're pitching with a client, about the importance of being you, being authentic, being human, not having all the answers, but having a way of engaging. How does that work? How do you become natural and human when you're presenting and not stilted?
I think it comes down to, my very first boss coming out of college told me, in this business, people hire people, not agencies. Agencies are just constructs. Best advice I ever received in my entire life. How to be human is really, I think, how can you be vulnerable?
Right.
And to me, that tends to be the underlying variable that changes people. When you're willing to stand there and say, I don't know.
I'm not sure about that.
I don't have a good answer for that. But if you give me 24 hours, I'll come back to you with the best thing I can come up with. But I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your skirt and try to make you think something I don't.
Exactly.
Or you're willing to talk about a mistake, or you're willing to talk about how this didn't work. But when you're willing to be vulnerable and say, look, I'm not perfect. We're humans. We make mistakes. And frankly, if you've been around the world for any length of time and you haven't made a mistake, I don't want to hire you because you're obviously not trying anything new. You're just doing everything super safe. And so I think that's a lot of it, is just being comfortable in your own skin and not trying to put on airs, and not, because people can feel that, right? They can feel when you're trying to make yourself appear like the person you think they want versus just being the person you are. Now, obviously, if you're a very crass and short individual, maybe you should be a little nicer and a little bit more deferential in how you answer questions. I've definitely seen that backfire against people. But people sense that. They sense that realness about people. And when you're putting on those airs, and it's, again, it comes down to trust and credibility. Because if you're not really showing me the real you, then I really don't know who I'm hiring. And so I don't really know if I can or can't trust you. But in fact, I'm probably leaning a little bit towards I can't, because you're shining me right now. Like, are you always going to be shining me? Am I ever going to know the real Tom Martin or the real Mike Lander? Or who is this person? So I think it's just have the confidence and be okay with that. So, and they may not like you. And if they don't, that's probably good, because you don't want to work with them. It's not going to be a good relationship.
Exactly. And I draw a distinction between being well prepared and being over rehearsed. You have to be well prepared, but you shouldn't be over rehearsed.
Yeah, you shouldn't sound like you're reading a monologue.
No, it just doesn't work. Just doesn't work.
And have you ever seen that when people try to really read it monologue, like they have memorized a script?
They have.
They end up presenting so much worse.
Yeah.
Because they're really just trying to remember, am I saying all the right words? And then God forbid they miss one. They blows them up. They just lose it.
Exactly.
And it's like, just have the bullet points of exactly what you want to say. But if you've practiced those bullet points enough, then the words around the bullets are going to fill in nicely, and you'll have it, and you'll have good command of the subject. And that's really the important thing.
Exactly. So question 2, topic 2. Why should you write a PowerPoint deck for every pitch, even the ones you deliver face-to-face over coffee?
Because if you don't, you're going to show up and throw up. Right. You're just going to start babbling.
Yeah.
No, the beauty of forcing someone, I actually had this conversation with another podcaster he's a sales podcaster, and he despises pitching with PowerPoints. And so I said, well, look, when you force yourself through the logical progression of writing a PowerPoint, and it doesn't have to be an actual deck, but just force yourself to write down, what is my argument exactly? What are my key points? How do they go together? What is my yellow brick road? You're forcing yourself down a rational pipeline that's going to help you see the weaknesses in your own argument. Because when you look at something, you read it, and that's when you can kind of go like, ooh, that doesn't really make sense, or that shouldn't go here. I should really talk about this point next, then this. It just helps you force yourself into just a really good strategic process to make sure that you're really putting the best argument forward. And then it gives you something that you can kind of rehearse in the car on the ride to the coffee, or practice it a little bit, so that, again, you don't know the script, but you know the core points, you know the points you want to make and what order you want to make, especially in a casual, because casual conversations have a way of just going off on a tangent.
Yeah.
And then you've got to bring it back and, hey, remember we were talking about this. Well, that was a fun sideline, but let's get back to what I'm here to really talk about. And if you haven't done that kind of work, unless you're someone who's been doing this a really long time and you're totally comfortable with conversational selling, you're going to end up just showing up. You're going to end up just blabbering a bunch of information, and they're going to leave the coffee and say, well, that was fun. And they're not going to remember a damn thing you just said.
Exactly right. Which is why really good discovery calls, are based around questions. You might not answer all the questions pre or in the discovery call, but you're going to cover like at least half the bases, and you're going to have thought through what those questions are, and you're going to have thought through what the likely outcome from the questions are, and you'll have a hypothesis. You won't just, as you say, show up and throw up on a discovery call. You can do, but your conversion rate's really low, like really low.
Yeah.
You've talked to a lot of salespeople, Tom, in your past, trained a lot, mentored a lot. How many salespeople do you think do really good discovery calls?
Gosh, 5%.
Wow.
Maybe 10.
Yeah.
1 out of every 10, let's say 10%. Because you can just see it. They're listening to respond, not listening to truly understand.
Absolutely.
And you can watch it. I literally am having a call this afternoon with a guy, and I watched his recorded sales call last week. And you can see like when the client says some words that click to, oh, well, I have a case study for that. Or, oh, we have a client that is in that space. You just see it click. And that's great. But he missed everything that came after where the guy was basically telling him the fact that you guys work with other people who look like us, not really a decision point for me. I mean, it's good. It's nice to know, but that's not making me any more or less likely to hire you. It was a totally other thing. And sure enough, when the guy stopped talking, the salesperson launched into we've got this, looks just like you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh my God, you just totally missed what he said. More importantly, maybe what he didn't say.
Yeah. You missed
what he
all
didn't
the gold
say.
Nuggets. You missed all the gold nuggets. And you focused on the rocks.
I wrote a blog post about this just last week about just like how I think the training salespeople should go through for discovery calls is they should send them to like marriage counselors. Because I've gone to marriage counselors with my wife, not afraid to say it. It's best if you're married, go do it. It's the best thing. It's the best investment your marriage will ever make because they teach you how to listen. And I maybe have not always been the best listener according to my wife, but it teaches you how to listen to really hear and understand versus respond, which is the biggest mistake most of us make when we listen. We're so busy. We want to win the argument or we want to show how smart we are or whatever. But really listening to hear what's being said, but more important, what's not being said. What doesn't really make sense about the person's answer? What doesn't necessarily align? Because you get into that and man, that's when magic happens. Because all of a sudden you start finding out things the other agencies aren't finding out in their discovery call because they don't ask. They don't, they've got their list of questions and they're just going down them like a checklist instead of going, wait, can we circle back to that thing you just said? That didn't make sense to me based on our experience with people in your industry. Why? What's going on there? And you'll get something, and you might be the only agency that asks it. And it'll be the thing that wins you the account because you're going to have an insight that nobody else does. Because one of the biggest things that I find clients fear is that when you tell them you've done a lot of other clients in their industry, they think you're going to typecast them. Right. And that you already think you have all the solutions versus seeing them as, yeah, we are in that industry, but we have our own unique set of challenges. And we need your help solving these unique set of challenges, not the set of challenges that everybody else has. That we also have. And that was like when I first kind of learned that, I was like, wow, that's compelling. That's important. And I always try to remember that is what's your unique challenge? What do you have? What's causing you a problem that isn't anybody else in your industry's base problem?
Exactly. So a couple of things that came out of that for me. 3 things, in fact, I think. I might forget the third because I was listening rather than preparing, which was
nice.
A lot of salespeople wait to give them what's in their head. They're just waiting for space. And to your point, the brain's got a funny way of closing its shutters, waiting until the music stops and then saying, now then, glad you mentioned that. They have no idea at all what they mentioned. Here's my thing. So that's, to me, it's a huge lesson. Just listen to what the person's saying and then work out where the priority is. The second thing that occurred to me, just as we were just discussing that kind of point, on the podcast, and I say this to all my guests, we'll go down some rabbit holes. And I've not really thought about why I say that, but it always happens. But the reason is because I find out that you've said something and I've gone, oh, Tom, now that's interesting. Talk a bit more about that. And what it does for the listener is people listening go, oh, that's intriguing. Wonder where he's going to go with this. And when I say, and it's very genuine, when I say to the listeners, I haven't prepped Tom on this question, it's genuine. I have not prepped you on that. And that's where the magic happens. We have 3 topics. We talk about the topics and then we delve into stuff. We peel back the onion. We get into some things and normally something pops out of that and you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like this discovery. I hadn't prepped the discovery thing. You hadn't either. But you've been in sales for donkey's years. But that's very true.
Well, not donkey's years. Let's not make me too old. But
I was talking about myself.
Definitely dog years. I don't know. It's dogs or donkeys. I don't know who has longer
cat
years.
Maybe it's cat years. Yeah.
But, actually your comment just made me think of a way to maybe summarize it up for people that makes it easy. If you walk into a discovery call or an early chemistry call with a client, whatever, and you've got a list of 5-10 things, let's say that we hope to get the answers to these questions. And you walk out and the only questions you've got answers to are those 10. A new question didn't appear or information outside of those 10 didn't
come out.
You failed. Yeah. That's probably not a good, you're going to think that was a great call, but now that I think about it, that would be a horrible call because you didn't learn anything you didn't know. I mean, you learned maybe what you didn't know the answer to that particular question, but you knew to ask that question. You're not going to learn what did you not know to ask? That's where the pain is. That's probably the bigger pain point that if you can solve that, you're going to win versus, the standard pain points. And I need to remember that. That's a good point to point out to my own clients because I think you're right. But you're only going to get that by listening, by truly listening and being open to what am I hearing and why am I hearing it? What's making them say this? Why would a company say these words? And trying to go down that rabbit hole. Because I think you're right. I've listened to enough of your podcasts and I've just gone down enough rabbit holes in my car with you to know that, that's usually where the gold is.
Yeah. That is where the gold is. Definitely.
Yeah. The other stuff's expected.
Yeah. The prep's interesting, Tom. Just bringing this to a close before we do the kind of last topic. And I've been on the buying side, as you know. If you're well prepared and you've got your questions, what it signals to me is you've respected my time, you've come prepared, and it builds a bit of trust. I'm more inclined then to answer the questions that you hadn't prepared that are a bit more digging into something. I'm far more likely to do that than if you rock up and I sense you're not really prepared. Because if I sense that, I'm like, this is going nowhere. So my mental shutters are down. You're going to have a hard time breaking through. You come well prepared, I'll give you more than you expect.
Yeah. Well, let's face it, the way to really be distinct in this world is to ask a person a question they had never considered or point out something, an idea, even if it's wrong. Just the fact that you connected 2 dots that don't normally get connected, that's how you stand out to people, I think. Especially in a brain industry, which let's face it, at the end of the day, advertising is a brain industry. We're selling what's between our ears. And the ability to rock me back and make me go, I never thought of it like that. I think that's huge. If you're the only agency that makes that client sit back, I mean, unless they just want a lapdog that's going to execute their own ideas, if they're truly looking for that strategic partner, which agencies always want to be, well, who are you going to pick? You're going to pick the person who just basically rattled off the standard industry stuff? Or are you going to pick the person that rocked you back and you spent the whole rest of the day, you couldn't get anything done because you just kept going back to that question they asked or that idea that they talked about and you couldn't get out of your head? That's who you're going to pick.
It is. Exactly right. So, last topic. Let's draw it to a kind of close. I love this. It's a great topic. What's the one word you should never utter during a pitch or follow-up conversation?
The one word you should never utter in a pitch, follow-up conversation, or actually any time in your life where you're having some sort of a negotiation or debate or argument with somebody, including personal, is the word why. Never, ever respond to somebody with why, because in every language that is spoken in the world where they have they have a word that means why, the word is internalized as a confrontational word. It's a challenge word. And so what happens, again, mentally, the moment you say, well, why did you do that, Mike?
Right.
You're no longer talking about whatever I'm here to talk about today. Mike's now defending Mike's answer.
Position. Exactly.
Yeah. whatever you just said, and I asked why, decision, whatever, as soon as the word why comes up, you're now defending whatever you've done, answered, etc. And so now what we're really doing is you're trying to convince me that you're right or you were correct. Or now we're talking about you. We're no longer talking about why you should hire me. We're talking about why you were right.
Yeah.
And it happens, it's across the board. So, but it's a natural thing, right? Because it's a natural way to say, well, why did you do that? Or why do you want to know that? Or, whatever. And this is muscle memory. It takes practice, but there's pretty much no question that starts with why that you can't use either what or how.
Yes.
And the other beauty is that when you say what or how, if you say, well, what led you to that decision? Or what about this concerns you? Or how would you see that working in our relationship?
Yeah.
You're leaning in. And you're not telling the person they were right or wrong. You're not making a judgment. You're asking for more. Can you tell me more? I want to hear more about that. So you're leaning into them. And what do? They lean back into you by giving you more. And that's how you'll get down to those not so obvious insights, by asking what and how questions. And it does reduce that natural shudder that goes up that goes, wait, why are you challenging me? What do you mean? Why did I do this? And again, I would tell you to do it in every conversation you have, personal, professional, whatever. And it's tough because you will, but again, it's where that preparation comes in, is get used to it. Think about what are all the possible why questions? How would I reframe it as a what or a how? But when you do it, it's magical. Absolutely magical. It gets people to open up more and talk to you more, trust you more. And you really do that's where you get to that insight that nobody else is going to get to.
So as you were saying that, I was thinking of situations, and there's loads I can think about that I've done that have gone wrong. Anyone out there that's got children, if you say to your child, why did you do that? You get a certain kind of response back. However, if you say, and I've tried this, what outcome are you expecting then? In a genuine way, kind of what were you thinking might happen? You get a very different response. Very different. It opens a dialogue rather than puts up a shutter.
Yeah, it really does. And it's, I stole it from someone else. It's not my unique idea I came up with. But I remember when I first was exposed to the concept, I was like, oh gosh, that makes perfect sense. Because why almost, and it wasn't explained like this, but in my mind, it insinuates whatever you said is wrong. Because if it's right, I wouldn't be pushing back on it. I wouldn't be saying why, right? And a lot of times that's not what you're doing. You're truly trying to say, like, what you're really intending to say is, how did you get there? What made you do that? That's what you're really trying to learn, but we just were lazy and we say why. But yeah, that's the one word. Take that one out of your vocabulary, take it out of your brain, make yourself automatically switch to those other words, and you will just get much, much better. You'll just get much better discussions across the board.
Tom, brilliant. So let's draw it to a conclusion. 3 takeaways. Someone listening, they're in the car, they've got to work, or they've gone somewhere. What are the kind of 3 takeaways? Things that someone could try tomorrow that's in a kind of commercial pitch situation?
I think the 3 things would be, first and foremost, have a plan going into the call, the meeting, of what you're trying to accomplish, as opposed to just showing up. Secondly, if the meeting includes some sort of presentation or even just a persuasive conversation that you're trying to have, write it down. Work your way through. If you could do it as a soliloquy, this is what it would look like. And really check yourself to make sure that it makes sense to you and others. And then lastly, when you're in the meeting, shut up and listen. And really, really listen to understand and be comfortable with silence, and really make sure that they finish talking before you talk, and that they don't have anything else they want to get in, that they don't want to throw in. But really listen for not just what you're hearing, but more importantly, what aren't I hearing? What am I missing here? What's not coming through? Because that's where the gold lies. If you can get to that, that's the kind of insight that gives you a massive edge in a pitch situation, and it can make the difference between winning and losing.
Brilliant. And as the host, the last one I throw in, the why. I hadn't really thought about it at all, but now you've said it, it makes perfect sense. Change why to what or how. You'll have much better conversations. Tom, it's been amazing. Thanks ever so much for joining me.
Oh, well, again, thank you for having me. Always honored to be on fun, smart podcasts like yours.
Thank you. And where can people find out more about you?
They can pop over to conversedigital.com. There's lots of free information I give out. They can grab me on LinkedIn at Tom Martin. Can't miss me. I'm pretty easy to find.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Higgle, the B2B Sales Club podcast series with your host, Mike Lander. Please subscribe so that you'll catch all the next episodes.